A new report based on documents from the NSA leaker exposing a secret tool being used by the federal government for internet surveillance. The Guardian newspaper reporting that a program called X Keystroke has the ability to collect nearly everything a user does on the internet. Two guests join us right now with very different views on the NSA surveillance program. Republican Congressman Justin Amash offered an amendment that would have stripped funding for much of this program. It was narrowly defeated by the House last week. Also joining us, former Democratic Congresswoman Jane Harman. She's a leading voice on intelligence and national security issues. She's now head of the Woodrow Wilson Center here in Washington. Congressman, let me start with you. Why do you hate this NSA surveillance program?
Well, Wolf, to be clear, the program we're talking about is not the program that was revealed today. The program that my amendment dealt with was the collection of telephone records. And what the government was doing through the NSA was collecting the phone records, and is collecting the phone records on a daily basis of every single American in the country without any suspicion. And that violates the Fourth Amendment. You have to have reasonableness to go after people's records. You have to have probable cause, and you need a warrant. And right now they're collecting phone records of everyone rather than just those who are under suspicion, which is how the Patriot Act was intended to be.
All right, let's let Congresswoman Harman respond. You used to be on the Intelligence Committee.
I was the ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, and I served on that committee for 8 years. And I was very involved as these programs began shortly after 9/11, when all of us were worried about plots against the United States. And by the way, I agree with Senator Feinstein, who chairs the Senate Intelligence Committee, who wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post today and said there are still plots hatching against the United States.
So why do you think the congressman is wrong?
He's wrong because this program doesn't collect data against Americans in violation of the Fourth Amendment. It collects metadata. Those are just lists of numbers which can only be accessed after there is an individualized warrant. It has to say, we have probable cause, or we have articulable suspicion that Wolf Blitzer, that might be true, I'm kidding, is connected to some foreign terrorist or foreign terrorist group. And then a federal court, that's what the FISA court is, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court, has to review the information and decide that, yes, it meets the test.
Congressman, why isn't that good enough for you?
Well, Wolf, metadata is data. It's the type of data that we have every day created by our phone records and by other records. And certainly the federal government can piece together a lot of our daily lives by looking at and collecting this metadata. And the Fourth Amendment protects our right to have this type of information not examined by the government on a daily basis. They're gathering this information, and that in itself is a violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, I totally disagree. There was a Supreme Court case in 1979 that said that individuals don't have any expectation of privacy about the phone numbers that they call. This metadata, these just lists of numbers without your name, without any personal identifying information, cannot be accessed on a daily basis. They can only be accessed if someone goes to this FISA court and makes the case that a specific individual with a name, Wolf Blitzer, Jane Harman, is connected to some foreign terrorist activity. And very few of these applications are granted, 300 in total, and very few people have access, and there have been no abuses.
The queries that are done, as we've seen, they don't have to get a court order to do those queries, and also the content is collected on a daily basis. And there's this. The Justice Department and intelligence community continue to rest on this case, Smith v. Maryland from 1979, where there was one person who was under suspicion, and it was for a limited period of time, and his phone records were collected, and the court said that was okay. That is a very different case from what we have today, where the phone records of every single American are collected without any suspicion on a daily basis. This is the United States of America. We have freedoms here. We have rights. And it would be no different than if someone came into your house and made copies of all of your documents and said, hey, don't worry, we're just collecting these documents. We're not going to look at them. We just want to have copies of them in case we need them in the future. That's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, just as this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment.
This program is clearly constitutional, and it just doesn't work that way. That's a way to, with respect, scare people, but that isn't how it works. And the amount of metadata that can be collected is reviewed every 90 days by the federal court. The provisions under which this all happens enacted by Congress. I know you opposed them all, but I think they were responsible. Sunset every 3 years, and Congress has a chance to review them. And oh, by the way, I again agree with Senator Feinstein in her op-ed today, who thinks there are reasons why we might narrow some of those provisions. Congress is debating this. I think that is a very good thing. And it might be time to narrow how much data is collected, what the standards for review are, and to do something else that I know you support, which is to have an ombudsman in the FISA court reviewing how it functions.
Well, if the American people have an expectation of privacy in this, if you go back to your districts and talk to the American people, as I've done, they will tell you that they expect this information to be kept private. The FISA court is a rubber stamp. It is not kept private because it's collected by the federal government and kept in a database. And you won't deny that it's collected by the federal government and kept in a database.
Pursuant to a court order, do you know how much data Google or pick a company collects on you? They have much more access to data on you than the federal government does. These controls work. There's no evidence that there's been abuse.
The Constitution is a restriction on the federal government. It's not a restriction on Google or Microsoft or any other private company. Those are companies that have to compete for customers. They don't have any legal authority to put you in prison. The federal government is a different type of entity. That's why we have a Constitution. It's meant to protect us. And the FISA court accepts federal government applications with almost 100% rate. They rarely turn down the federal government. And there is very little oversight. I, as a member of Congress, can't get access to the court opinions. I have to beg for access, and I'm denied if I make that request.
All right, very quickly, Jim.
I think you should have access. I think that's one of the changes Senator Feinstein recommends. There's no evidence that there has been abuse of these programs, and they are constitutional. And we fixed, by the way, some practices happening in the first term of the Bush administration where these programs were not subject to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act.
Jane Harman, Justin Amash, a good, serious debate to be continued here in the Situation Room.